here, and then I'll introduce what's going to happen. Marissa, do you want to introduce yourself? We'll go around the table so everyone knows who everyone is and what their role is there. I think we all know you anyway.
My name is Marissa Barbelli. I am the Vice Chair of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. And
I'm Mark Rumlad. I'm the Chair of the Historic Landmarks Preservation Commission. And at this point, I think I'm the longest serving member. I've been at it for about 24 years.
Thank you.
So you started with 5.
Steve, want to introduce yourself?
Oh, we're going this way.
Yeah.
Alderman, 8th Ward.
I'm Doug Coop. I'm the Alderman of the 2nd Ward.
Bill Chiari, Alderman of the 5th.
David Martinstein, Assistant Court Counsel.
Jeffrey Morrell, Alderman Ward 1.
Asheville Riley, Alderman Ward 7.
Rennie Scott Childress, Ward 3.
I didn't think he had a chair, but he does. Okay, just to update everyone, we are going to be looking at a proposal for reworking the Landmarks Commission, the documentation, and to see if we can clean it up and get there. What we've done in the past was talk about possibly merging heritage and historical landmarks. That came up, but I think part of with the mayor's announcement with the restructuring some of the internal workings in the planning department and possibly hiring a part-time person to handle a lot of the administrative details that unnecessarily go to landmarks. I think a lot of the concern about streamlining or merging the commissions is not as much a concern, I think, as it was then. And again, if anyone disagrees with me, please feel free to, when we discuss this, to state that. So the original legislation that came out, which did involve the merging of the two units, was supposed to go to a public hearing. It passed out a committee for a public hearing, but obviously that is no longer on the table because we're going to look at other alternatives in a different direction. And I speak with a lot of confidence that what Marissa's about to go over today will give us a good direction between that and the structure within City Hall and the planning department. I think we'll be a lot closer to where we want to be and where everyone seems to want to be after tonight. And my intention is after we get the presentation that everyone look at it. It's going to go to all the departments that are involved, all the key players and the people on the commissions, and we'll have a chance to indicate what we like, what we love, what we might not like, and we'll begin actually, working on crafting something that ultimately works for everyone and is in the best interest of Kingston, not only for today but for generations. So that's kind of it in a nutshell where I see the direction of where we are now, where we're going. Anyone has any questions for me or?
Question.
Yes.
Just for clarification, you said that this is off the table, the May 16th
The version,
draft?
yes. Correct.
Okay. What does that mean? It's
Yeah, because we never actually voted on the actual document or legislation. That never actually came to vote, so there's no need to do anything with that.
okay.
I mean, we can use pieces of that, and again, when it goes to the court council, they'll be able to have input on what we're seeing tonight.
So we're calling this one that she's presenting then the second draft?
Well, no, it's really just well, this is the first draft of this one, but
Okay.
basically, like in the past with ethics legislation, with the gun legislation, with renaming policy, basically a document is brought before us, everyone kind of vets it, looks at it, sees what they do and don't like, and then, it's a process of getting enough input and feedback from everyone to where it's a collaborative effort. And that in essence, is what's happening here. We're going to look at this, compare it to what we had, if you like some of the language there better, or think something maybe should be in there. But yeah, this is going to be a standalone for landmarks only. and not a combined effort at this point. Down the road, and this is just as an aside, I ultimately see if this works, and between the internal structure at City Hall and this, if we can get this drafted properly, I think at that point, we'll have, if we can get this running smooth, then we can look at the, maybe cleaning up a little bit of the heritage one, which I don't think is as intensive as this one, quite honestly, as far as if we need to then make changes on that separately. But that's kind of where I'm at this point. And again, if anyone, sees a better or different direction, or thinks, thinks we're heading down a wrong path or something, might want to speak up.
But Jeffrey, if you want to dwell more into the zoning code, feel free. Just send me whatever you want to do.
Thank you.
Okay, Marissa, it's all yours. Thank you.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for having me here, and having my colleague Mark here. I want to apologize for the single-sided copies you received. I did request that they be double-sided, and the printer gave me single-sided, so they
I like single-sided.
trying to be wasteful. And another thing about the ordinance in front of you, our commission has been discussing this since before the proposal to merge the commission came up. So if anything, it sort of gave us new urgency to bring this to you, this improved ordinance of what we currently have. We do have a good ordinance. A good ordinance is better than no ordinance, but it can also be better. So why update the existing ordinance? We've long prided ourselves as the historic city, the third oldest in the state. I think many of us consider ourselves to be preservationists, and we genuinely want to see the buildings, our historic buildings, maintained and preserved. But good faith alone is not enough to keep those buildings standing. We need strong policy, and for municipalities, that policy is embodied in the local preservation ordinance. And what makes a strong policy is one in which the purpose of regulating historic buildings is clearly stated, and the process for doing so is fair and balanced. And perhaps more importantly, the actual text is comprehensible to the public. James Merton Fitch was actually one of the, he was a pioneer in the preservation movement. He helped establish preservation as a discipline, as a profession. He founded the first preservation program, academic preservation program at Columbia, which is where I went to school. So just to back up and walk you through what a fundamental preservation ordinance is, it's similar to other municipal ordinances, but there are some key parts. One is the statement of purpose. It clearly states the ordinance purpose. Definitions. It includes easy to understand explanations for technical terms to avoid confusion over concepts that might not easily be understood. Third, the creation of a preservation commission. It spells out the positions within government, the number of members, the qualifications of those members, their terms in office, and the number of members required for a quorum, among other things. Four, it powers and duties of the commission. It stipulates everything the Preservation Commission will have the authority to do. It also outlines the nature of the commission's decisions, whether they're required or recommended. 5, the criteria for designating historic properties, districts, and landmarks. It established objectives for relevant criteria for designating districts and landmarks. And in many cases, uses similar criteria to those for listing on the National Register of Historic Places, which is federal criteria for designating places of significance. 6, the procedures for historic landmark and district designation. And that explains who can nominate properties, how and when affected properties are notified, owners are notified, how many public hearings there are, who must approve the designations, in this case is the Common Council, and the timetable for these actions to occur. 7, the procedures and standards for reviewing alterations and demolitions to protected properties. And they articulate what types of changes are subject to review by the commission. And they also fully explain the standards, guidelines, and process for review that's used by the commission. 8, how and when to determine economic hardship. This is the portion of the ordinance that is the safety valve. It sets forth the process and criteria used in determining whether an ordinance imposes an economic hardship on an owner. 9, penalties. Ordinances must be enforced to be effective, and penalties in some municipalities can range from fine to incarceration. And obviously that's a discussion we need to have with our Corporation Counsel's office about what penalties can Kingston enforce. I think it's been an ongoing conversation. And I'd like to back up and say that this whole ordinance would obviously need to be reviewed by the Corporation Council. And then finally, the appeal process. The appeals provision helps ensure a citizen's right to due process is not diminished. So specifically with regards to our existing ordinance, if you're probably asking if our ordinance already has all those parts, why are we talking about a new ordinance? Well, a few major things. One is that there's conflicting chapters. It's chapter 264, which is related to historic and architectural design districts, but it really is technically only for the stockade, and it duplicates what's already in, to a large extent, what's already in the zoning chapter for Article 9 for the Historic Preservation Commission. So, with one minor exception being, the underlying zoning district does or does not apply. In an architectural design district, it does not apply. In the chapter 4 or 5 for Article 9, it does apply. That's confusing. The public purpose in the Article 9 of Chapter 4 or 5 for Landmarks Commission is buried under designation procedures. So when you would go to the first part of the explanation of the Landmarks Commission, you would not understand the purpose of that section. And throughout our existing ordinance, it's vague language. It's at times challenging for us commissioners to refer to. I can only imagine that if it's difficult for us to refer to, it's also difficult for the applicants who come before us, as well as other members of the public. Strong, as I said before, a strong ordinance is comprehensible. So, in preparing the proposed ordinance that's in front of you, we used the 2014 New York State Preservation Model Law. It was put together by the State Historic Preservation Office, also known as SHPO, and the Preservation League of New York State. It's meant for to use as reference by other municipalities who might want to adopt the preservation ordinance, or for municipalities like ours who want to update the ordinance. It uses language that is clear and concise. It incorporates standards and practices that have been developed in the last 3 decades. It stipulates a greater degree of interfacing between our commission and Common Council, other parts of the government as well. It also codifies the requirement of a certified local government program. So to back up, our existing ordinance is partially based on a model law, but it's a model law of the mid-'80s. And a lot has changed since then. And I think for any policy, there's always a time to revisit it and see if there's room for improvement. And I think that time has come. Certified local government. We discussed this earlier in the year with the public, but just to remind everybody, Kingston is a CLG, and it's actually a federal program that's managed by the State Preservation Office, and it integrates historic preservation into local planning. It also establishes best practices for ensuring the success and stability of local efforts. That includes creating the model law that we've used, and also helps create a framework for design guidelines, which we have somewhat, but we could probably do a better job of creating design guidelines. It also integrates federal, state, and local preservation efforts and standards into municipal preservation programs, and provides critical assistance. So when we have questions about commission actions, applications, general program administration, we call them up and they can help us. They are a go-to authority. And also through CLG, we have grants, preservation grants, undertake surveys, studies, create public materials, so on and so forth. So the objectives of this ordinance that's in front of you are the three. One is improve the clarity and comprehension. To incorporate the administrative improvements that were proposed by the Corporation Counsel's office and the ordinance, the previously proposed ordinance, to merge the commission. And I'll walk you through those improvements in just a moment. And then also to propose new tools and measures for preservation. Clarity. This ordinance would remove Chapter 264, Historic and Architectural Design Districts. It also provides more detailed legislative intent and duties of the commission that's up front. It uses concise phrasing and terminology to explain criteria for designation, application review, affirmative maintenance, declaration of hardship, and enforcement. Again, we already have these things in the existing ordinance, but this is more clearly stipulates how the commission operates, the criteria for review, how an applicant can engage with our commission. And finally, it codifies requirements of the CLG program. So as a commission, as a CLG community, we are required to, commissioners are required to do annual training, we're required to submit an annual report, we're required to maintain an inventory of significant building, and we have other duties too. And so this ordinance, whereas our existing ordinance does not incorporate those requirements. So you don't have to know that we are CLG to know that you need to abide by those requirements. Administrative improvements. The Corporation Counsel's office recommended that our commission have alternate members. We don't currently have that. We have 7 members only. This would establish 3 alternates that still need to have some of the same baseline qualifications for being a commissioner. It also has a clause for removal of members by cause, be it for ethical reasons or excessive absence from meetings. It also stipulates cost of operations are to be provided by the Common Council. And it also, this wasn't proposed in the previous ordinance, but we think it's really important. It's what most municipalities have. It's lengthens the commission approval to 24 months. Currently, when we grant what we call preservation notice of action, which we're proposing it could be called certificate of appropriateness, which is more the common term for our approval that we grant to applicants, it only lasts for 12 months. We all know that sometimes projects take longer than 12 months to complete. So this gives the applicant an opportunity to ask for an extension if after 24 months they haven't completed their project. And there's also the proposed ordinance stipulates that the Zoning Board of Appeals is the official appeal body for decisions that the applicant would want to appeal. One note about that is that any application that is appealed to the Zoning Board of Appeals must use the same information and rationale that is used by the commission. They cannot accept new information and make a determination based on that new information that was not given to the Landmarks Commission. New tools and measures. So this ordinance, it broadens the definition of what can be considered a historic resource to include something that may include a site that may yield important information about prehistory, a property that may have achieved significance within the last 50 years, and possibly publicly accessible interiors might be worthy of designation, and scenic landmarks. Examples of possible scenic landmarks could be Company Hill Path, or the vista from Hosford Park. I think we all recognize that historic significance, not just in buildings, that they can be in landscapes and they can be interiors, that some sites may be important not just for being old in European settlement sense, but before European settlement. And also that those sites may contain archaeological resources that are worthy of documentation. So this is a way of saying this site is in a part of Kingston that we suspect may yield some important information, and we want to ensure that the applicant, by means possible, documents whatever evidence is recovered from that site. I wrote this before I heard the mayor's budget presentation, so creative preservation staff position. We can put a nice check mark. I hope we can if this budget is adopted, but we've been talking so much about, and I think this is how this whole discussion started in the beginning of the year, is how can we improve the process? And at that time, the suggestion was to merge commissions. But really, if we want, talking about improvement, we're talking about having a staff position that can do public outreach, work with applicants who are coming to the commission, help them prepare so they come ready, and the commission is ready, and they can get quicker approval. So there's a consistent voice. Somebody can keep the records and help interface with the other departments that collaborate with the commission, such as the Building Safety Division. So it's not just the commission as volunteers doing the work of the working with applicants, and also going to various departments getting assistance as needed. So this helps me bring preservation more into the fold of city administration. Something that we've talked about a long time, I think going back further than since I have been on the commission, is the comprehensive citywide preservation plan. This is a fundamental document for any community that has serious preservation goals. It's sort of the roadmap for not only identifying resources that haven't already been designated, but how is the city working to address preservation of them? And it's also a way of incorporating preservation into larger planning goals. If we have a preservation plan that's identified significant resources, identified possible future historic districts, it makes it easier to work with planning to say, oh, you're updating this part of the zoning. We've been looking at this historic district. It's a way of getting everybody on the same page, not just city admin, not just the commission, but also members of the public. It's also a public engagement tool, getting the public involved and recognizing what's around them as significant. And then finally, zoning and preservation go hand in hand. An updated zoning ordinance should be responsive to historic neighborhoods. I think everyone would agree at this right now that the zoning is not exactly most responsive in historic districts, and so for commission decisions for applications in historic districts, it require us to be very sensitive to not only what the zoning text says, but what's appropriate for that neighborhood. It's not one size does not fit all. So with that said, I can go through the nitty-gritty of the text. I also have, I think some of you already have printouts of this, but it breaks down all the differences between the existing ordinance and the proposed ordinance that's in front of you.
Does anyone have any questions right now from Marissa? I mean, we can, there's a lot to digest, obviously, in this, and I know a lot of you have had a lot of time to go over some of the changes, to ask for specifics, but, anyone have anything?
Like you said, though, I've only seen this like a day or two, so I
Yeah.
need to,
So again, I think, and again, if someone has a better idea, certainly throw it out there, but I think the best course of action is take the two documents she has and, look at it. We're gonna get it to, the department heads that would be involved in this, corp counsel, I think already has this. And we're just gonna, flush out some good ideas and try to fine tune this, as we go. And, Andrea's been, Alderman Shaw's been involved in, as the point person in this, and you can utilize me or her to get to Marissa or directly her, and we'll, start piecing this together. Hopefully sooner than later as far as that goes, but does that sound like
That sounds,
Yeah.
I'd like to give you just a little overview of some stuff that Marissa didn't have a chance to
Sure,
get
absolutely.
into. Part of the beauty of a code, of updating the code so that it is consistent with state law and federal law as opposed to what we came up with back in the 80s and again in the late 90s was, one is some tax benefits to residents and commercial property owners. If we stay closely following the Department of Interior federal law guidelines, more and more people will be able to take advantage of a 20% rebate on the costs of fixing up their houses, or in a case of a commercial structure, it's a 40%. So by echoing that federal language in here, we're really delivering some extra benefit to residents that we've tried to do kind of on an ad hoc basis with the commission over the years, but since it's not in writing, people by the time they get to us may have a difficult time fitting into these criteria. And another thing that I want to point out is being consistent with state law gives us a bunch of benefits, not just the CLG grants that she brought forth, but if we follow the model law and as it's being adopted by other municipalities, we don't have to bump into walls the way that we have for decades here. We're trying to enforce language no one else has got. We can look at what Schenectady ran into or Troy ran into and say, okay, our language is essentially the same, so that rule also applies to us. And so we don't have to learn everything from scratch. And the third, and I really want to stress this, is this final integrates us with the rest of the city. Having served on this commission for over 20 years, I can tell you that we are the redheaded stepchild of commissions. We come last in every design review. Usually by the time folks have come to us, they've been to lots and lots of meetings and are wondering what the heck we're doing talking about design at this stage, late stage of the game. Part of what this does is makes us part of the planning process in a way we've never been before. And I am really hopeful that that will improve a coordinated review within the city so that people get more of a one-stop shop kind of arrangement when they walk into the planning office, that it will be somebody who actually knows this law as well as zoning, as well as the basics for the building department as well. And I think that will make our jobs as commissioners much smoother, much better, and really deliver some value to our citizens and our property owners. So please take a look at it, take it seriously. When it comes to heritage, I would ask that one thing you guys need to look at is eliminating the duplication in our maps. We've got a ton of overlap, especially uptown and downtown. and that we both have signage review in the same area probably makes very little sense. And that is the one area that I think that perhaps you'll be looking to tweak either a map or some rules to make it one or the other, not both.
Excellent, thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
If I might add, there's nothing in the proposed ordinance that's novel. There's nothing that we wrote that, this will be fun. It's either in the model law, it's in our existing ordinance, or it's from Buffalo's law, Syracuse, Saratoga Springs, Rochester. All the cities have very progressive, proactive policies. So just wanted to put that out there. There's no tricks in this ordinance.
That's what you wrote, same thing.
Yes, we locked it over.
All that extra time.
Right.
Marissa, I know that you went over this at your last agency meeting, part of the rest of it, you went over all of this presentation for the commission, and it was well received with the commissioners?
Yeah.
I mean, as I said, we've been talking about it. They reviewed the model law in the past, so none of it was new to them, but yes. And
Yeah, it was very well received, I might say. We're hopeful that this will improve our ability our job is to look ahead decades, sometimes centuries. It's a real rare treat in city government to be able to have a time frame like that. It's been frustrating a lot when people show up and we're at the tail end of a review and they're fighting us over something that shouldn't be such a big problem. If we have a law written more along these lines, I suspect that Kingston will be a better, stronger, more strongly historic city for a long, long time to come. Our present law has a lot of flaws. This fixes quite a few of them, and I think will serve us well going forward, long after the city has been handed over to the next generation or two. And that's the kind of time frame that we've been charged with, and I urge you to take that kind of long view when you take a look at this. Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you, and I agree, and I think we have a lot of resources. Jim Noble's been at this a long time. I think we need to pick his brain, and a lot of department heads, a lot of people in the community who've been involved before, who are involved now, or who are, people who have been before the board. I mean, try to get as many opinions, pick as many brains as possible. I think that's something that's important at this point, so that we can
And if you get a chance to
not
talk
overlook
to
anything.
Ed Ford, the city historian, he's 100, but he's amazing.
Yeah, yes, he is. Yes, he is. But I think this was a good step, good presentation. Anyone have any other questions or comments before we?
Just a comment to Marissa and Mark also, we have a lot to read here, a lot to consider, but it's a very impressive piece of work, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Jeffrey, yes?
I have a question about the process. So this is what we're working on now, but the previous one that we were presented was never voted down, so.
It's tabled. If you don't act on it within 2 meetings, it goes away.
Okay,
So if we don't act on it, it's as if we voted it away.
okay. All right, that's what I was confused about.
Yeah, that never came before a vote anyway. That never vote on that action done. And again, that you can use and
Compare the.
yeah, you can still look at that and you might find some language you like in that for certain
Okay.
sections,
Well,
feel free to do
Marissa
that.
did a great job too, making it very clear. I can't remember what was it, underlined when it was
Yeah.
in there, or, if you read the gray box, and the whole thing is incredibly well done.
I underlined, text that's underlined is from the existing ordinance. Text that is italicized is What a Texas underline also might be from the a suggestion of the Corporation Council. Text that is italicized indicates a clause that is recommended by the model law that isn't currently in our existing ordinance, so it's a new addition. And then bold and italicized, the text is a clause that was adapted from another New York municipality's preservation ordinance. Obviously, all the words are new. I mean, I could have italicized every word, but that wouldn't be helpful. So it's the concepts, focus on the concepts.
Anything else? Anyone? Any other comments, questions? I thank you, and we will obviously be in touch and be seeing and hearing a lot of each other. And again, I urge everyone to go over this with a fine-tooth comb, and we'll flush out a great document. And like Mark alluded to, not only the generations of buildings and the history here, but also we want to document that lasts as long as it's preserved as well. It's something that works for now and generations from now, that this will still hold up. So again, thank you.
And if anybody has any questions while you're reading and want clarification, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to anybody.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.